Performing triplets on Push 2 is a possibility, but since Push 2 is built around a grid of 8 pads, it can be a little more challenging to understand where you are within the rhythm. Essentially, when you set up a 3/4 time signature, for example, something that's not based on 4/4, then you're going to find Push and Ableton play through the 8 pads, treating each group of 3 as a new measure. Now this is fine for the first 2 measures if we're looking at quarter notes. However, once you get into the next measure, it actually overlaps to the next line. I'm going to show you how this works by first selecting my kit. Then I'm going to select my kick drum to make sure that's the instrument that I'm playing. And now I'm actually going to set the time signature to 3/4 on Ableton. I'm not able to do that directly from the Push at this point in time. Once you've selected 3/4 time in Ableton, then you can go ahead and start sequencing 3/4 sections. I'm going to go ahead and select one measure, and it starts to play through. As you can see, it's just playing the first 3 beats. That's because I have quarter notes selected. If I select eighth notes, you're going to find that it moves through 6 pads. In other words, right now, it's doing 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so on and so forth. So I can program one measure at a time very easily this way. Now I'm dealing with 3/4 time. I'm playing on the downbeat of each beat. Now it becomes a little more challenging if you want to play 2 measures. Let's look at how that works. I'm going to go ahead and select 2 measures, and I'm going to play you see how it repeats at an awkward location within the pad series. I'm going to go ahead and just have it play on the downbeat of each measure. So now I have a kick playing on the downbeat of each of these 2 measures in 3/4 time, and I have hi-hats playing on beats 2 and 3 of each measure. Working with triplets is going to be just like working with 3/4 time, because we're going to be dealing in groups of 3 pads. So I just gave you an example of how you can actually work with 3/4 time and how Push adapts that to the grid of 8 pads. If you want to work in 4/4 time, but you want to have a rhythm that's actually based in triplets, you'd have each of the 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, being subdivided into triplets. So you'd have da 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 da, that kind of sound. Let's look at how you can work that out. I'm going to actually enable 4/4 time in Ableton over here. I made sure that you can't actually change the time signature manually on Push at this point in time. So now I'm going to select one measure, and you're going to see that it starts playing through. Of course, I haven't selected any hits, so there's no sound coming out. What we're seeing now is that we are actually playing only to the 6th pad. It's just ignoring the last 2. In other words, we have 1 da da, 2 da da, 3 da da, 4 da da. That's our one measure is now on 2 lines. Let's go ahead and see what it sounds like. That's essentially playing 4/4 time. However, now we're playing triplets. I'm going to go ahead and put a snare in there so it's a little easier to hear. Essentially what the Push is doing is it's using just these 6 pads on each of the first 2 rows within the first measure. This gives you a little less space to work with because it's actually negating certain pads, which means you have to change how you work with measures a little bit. That's a straightforward overview of how you work with triplets and how the Push demonstrates them to you using the LED pads.